Our next question comes from George Paik. He asks, taking the creed of the Declaration of Independence, of rights and government securing them, as America's base of identity, might that explain US policy reflexes? Could it push us toward individualism and US sovereignty and away from collaboration? Does it partly explain populism? Conversely, might it push us toward addressing and intervening abroad on human rights issues?
No, I mean, it's a great question. And I have really tried to, at least in my own writing and thinking, is try to bring in US culture into the discussion for national security. And again, it's absent largely. And I think, if you want to understand why has, the US, have a global program to combat disease, I don't think traditional national security can explain that. I mean, I think there is sort of a human culture side, that explains these programs. It's sort of what American, but policymakers always has to answer that question. If we're building schools in Afghanistan, why aren't we building schools in the United States? And that's a hard one, I think, sometimes for people. And usually they'll go on to, the foreign aid budget in the US is less than 1% of the budget. And it's minuscule, it's tiny. And I think people often don't know how big the United States is. And I usually always try to highlight we're the third most populous country in the world. By GDP, we're the largest economy. PPP, we're number 2. We're a very large country. And I love Colin Powell in his confirmation hearing in 2001 to be Secretary of State, said something to the effect, the United States, we're a country connected by 1,000 cords around the world because it has been so welcoming to immigration. And so people have those interests, that they voice around the world. And then, again, you could be more pragmatic about it and say, well, on the southern border, why are people willing to risk their lives to walk, or be smuggled into the United States, for the better life? And you really, I think, saw it in the 90s, beginning with NAFTA and then sort of the reinvigoration of the trade treaty, you can bring stability by promoting trade and development, around the world, and then people won't risk their lives to sort of migrate in the way they do. And so, there's that dimension. And then there's always, right, the disease, brings everything right to the fore. That's the other reason, why do you want to eliminate smallpox or polio around the world? So you don't get it. And so there is that dimension. And then the important benefit is, that helps that society as well. But yeah, no, it's great. I think we need more discussion and thinking on how US culture gets pulled into foreign policy and national security. Oftentimes we want to, very rationalize it and look at threats and to go address those threats. And we don't necessarily consider, well, how does it, how does it improve, right? How does it improve the world? Or is it sort of the right thing to do? Because part of that, so the downside of that, since you raise a declaration, I'll bring in the Constitution, you're seeing the shortcomings of federalism. The fact that state governments, are really the dominant form of government in our personal lives. And you're seeing the shortcomings of federalism as we address COVID-19, that we don't have the ability to really have a national solution. Because it's a prerogative of state governments, largely, without getting into deeper discussions on states' rights and how that works.
Let me just, if I can, two finger for a moment, Derek, because just something that you said now, and going back to something you said in response to Joel's questions as well, the test for a national security establishment coping with these human security issues is, I think, to be able to explain to people in some form, how you have come to your priorities. So, for example, like right now, you gave a great set of, look, why do we spend money on disease eradication around the world? You could say some of it maybe because there's an altruistic strain running through the American body politic, but that there's a practical reason that we don't want to get these diseases, and if we eliminate these diseases around the world, then we are lessening the risk to ourselves. Why do we sign trade agreements with other countries? The logic is, well, you may lose in the short run, certain sectors of society and the economy may lose, but in the long run, you are creating societies where people won't migrate to yours and where they'll be able to buy your goods and services in return. But it does sound like the challenge then is coming up with kind of this explanation rather than, well, we just do these things because national security and end of discussion. So, but then also again, the priorities, which is, where do you cooperate? Where do you diverge? And I think this is also a challenge we're going to be facing, which is, we have a tendency that when a country does not cooperate with us in one area, we like to burn down all of the bridges across the board, and we may not have that luxury moving forward. I mean, we'll see how the search for a vaccine for COVID-19 moves forward, but this isn't, as you pointed out in your opening remarks, this isn't the only pandemic that we faced over the last 20 years, and there may be other pandemics more deadly in the future. I mean, thank God, even though this is a particularly infectious pandemic, it does not have the mortality rate that in the past we've had with other plagues and things. But that may change in the future, where we have to then work with another government for a solution, even when that government does things which offend our values, or more importantly, may clash with our preferences in other areas. And so it does seem that this question of narrative then comes back, which is you have to be able to explain, perhaps not not just simply as a bumper sticker, but at least have that narrative in place, why we're doing the things that we're doing, and that in some ways we've had a narrative collapse where we are doing things and citizens are looking and saying, oh, I'm not seeing a benefit from this, and therefore we should stop doing it.